All right. Welcome back, everyone. As Carl mentioned, we are now going to dive into our You Ask, We Train session. For this session, it is entirely based around the questions you have around using ConnectWise. So let me know what's something you struggle with, what's something you've been curious about, what's a question that's been burning on your mind all week that you can't wait to get answered. Drop it down in our questions section below, and I'll be happy to go over that. While I wait for some of those questions to come in, I'll go ahead and go over a couple of topics that I am excited about going over. But I'll be happy to move on to your questions as soon as you guys have them. So ask, ask, ask away. One second. Let's see if I can find the slide I want. So one thing I like to kind of set the stage with whenever I'm going to be talking about something more abstract, like in this case, whatever your questions may be, is I wanted to show this blueprint we have on the university that illustrates the ConnectWise managed lifecycle. This is not only how customers are going to kind of flow through as they interact with your business, but this is how information flows through ConnectWise Manage as well. Really one of the key driving efficiencies for using Manage is how all these different silos in your business join together and use that same information to create a nice standardized smooth experience from end to end, all the way from marketing through the sales process and quoting, to regardless of whether you sold a project or just working tickets or working on selling product itself, it all flows over to the invoice using the exact same information we started off with over on the opportunity. This way, what you invoice for matches what was sold, and that's going to create a better experience overall for your customers and make everyone on your team's job even easier. And then lastly, at the end of the day, we want to look at how we did overall and use some of the reporting available to go back and see what went well, what didn't, and what we can do better next time. All right, I think I'm seeing a couple questions start to come in, so give me a second and I will look at those. All right, I see one question about setting up reminders for agreements. So I'll go ahead and show what that's going to look like. Reminders for agreements are going to be set up in ConnectWise Manage, and those are going to be set up using workflow rules. So here I am in the setup tables. I'm going to look for workflow rules. I already did a search earlier. Whoops. Here I'm in my workflow rules setup table, and specifically I'm going to want to look at agreements. Now this question was specifically asking about creating reminders in the form of tickets. So you actually have a lot of options available to you when you want to decide exactly how you want to notify your team and under what conditions. So let's say our reminder is going to be based on 45 days before an agreement anniversary or expiration. So let's hop into this one here. And right now, our event is creating an activity. So this is going to be one of those green schedule records we see on our calendar. This is an activity that's going to be linked to both the customer and the agreement itself, letting us know that some action needs to be taken. In this case, we either want to call the customer, letting them know their agreement is about to expire, or schedule a meeting to kind of talk about how this agreement has done over its last year for the anniversary itself. But we are not limited to creating an activity. We actually have quite a few action types available to us. Some common ones I see is sending an email, going ahead and contacting someone. We can also use those push notifications I mentioned earlier, or like the question here was mentioned, we can create a service ticket. When we are creating a service ticket, the way we control how that ticket is created isn't really from here. Here we choose what template we want to use, and these templates tell us exactly how that ticket gets created. It gives us the summary information, and like the question I'm answering right now asked, you can choose what service board it gets created on. Let's see what else we have on here.
The questions have begun to flow, Mitch. You got plenty to do now.
I see. I see a whole lot on Cell, so I want to start off on Manage, and then I'll switch over and do all of the Cell ones after that. So keep those questions coming. I'm not just skipping over your Cell questions, just rather than jump around and focus on one and then move to the other. So the follow-up question to what I asked earlier was not just annual agreements, but perhaps firewall renewal reminders. So regardless of what you want to remind yourself on, workflow rules are the way to go. So in this case, we talked about renewing off of agreements. If it's a firewall and you don't have that firewall tracked as an agreement, what you're probably tracking it as is a configuration. And we'll use the exact same logic we just did for agreements, except we'll apply it to configurations instead. So here we have 60-day license renewal. Just replace the word license with firewall here, and we'll go ahead and make that change. So in this case, we have a specific configuration type. I don't care what configuration type 22 is. Let's see if we can find something a little better. Do we have firewall in here? Managed firewall. Boom. That looks good. Save that. And now this is good to go. All I need to do now is customize my action. I'm going to have the same actions available to me that I did for agreements as I do for configurations. We are using a work in progress status. Is there a way to automatically move a ticket to this status when time entry is started and another one once time entry is completed? So that's a little tricky. How do you determine when a time entry is started? So as far as the workflow rules go, they are only going to see the existence of or the absence of a time entry. To start a time entry, to open up the time entry window, that doesn't flag anything on the ticket itself. We haven't saved anything. We've just gone ahead and prompted you to enter in your time entry information. So that's not something we can workflow rule off of. One thing I've seen done in the past with the work in progress automatic status change is if these tickets are scheduled for a specific time on the calendar, on a member's calendar, we can use a workflow rule to go ahead and flip the status when that time arrives. So I'll go ahead and take a look at how that's going to be set up. And I probably don't have any workflow rules that do this already, so I create a new one. I'm going to give it something specific. So a year from now, when I come back and find this, I'll know why I created it. Actually, I just remembered, because I'm working with service tickets, if I want to use specific service statuses, those are going to be tied to a specific service board. So I need to select the service board I want to use where these tickets will be found. Let's say they're on my help desk board. Now I'll create my event. And now I can see find the latest open scheduled record is past due. This will go ahead and find whenever we've passed that scheduled start date. And this is going to be looking at the scheduled resources on the ticket itself. And that's what we'll use to identify them in these tickets, and we'll use the actions to go ahead and flip the status. Is there a way to send a mid-month invoice for an agreement that will auto-generate an invoice on the first of the month? Kind of. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm gonna hop over to the invoicing screen. This is where we will typically create our brand new invoices for agreements. I'll walk through what we're gonna see here and what we have to do differently to get that mid-month invoice created. So agreements are going to create their invoices on a recurring cycle that you specified. Most often we see this done monthly. And those agreements, let's see if I can push this out a little bit if I have anything generating in the future. Looks like people already created my invoices for me. Nope, I meant to do the through date. There we go. So I have all these invoices scheduled to be created before January 1st of 21 next year. And you'll notice they're all created on a cycle. I can't inject a new entry in this list. They're going to keep creating on that recurring cycle. Now, if you do need a one-off invoice just to send off to the customer in addition to what we have here, we do have an option available for you. And that is going to be using one of our special invoices. This allows you to create invoices for one-off scenarios that you aren't invoicing for another way. And these kind of one-off agreement invoices are a good example of when that's possible. From here, you'd select the company. Let's go ahead and do Chris Crop Boats. I don't have Chris Craft Boats in here. I always have Chris Craft Boats. Let's see who I do have. We'll use Barry Supermarket. You'll use the miscellaneous invoice type. And then you can use this apply to go ahead and find a record to apply to. Now in this case, this company I picked only had service tickets, but if they had an agreement, that's what I'd want to select right here. That way we can still see this miscellaneous invoice tied back to the agreement itself, listed with all the rest of those normal recurring invoices. As far as for how much we're invoicing, once I've created this invoice, I think I have everything I need saved. I can add any products I want to invoice for or just enter a dollar amount. What tools are there in Manage to help with this new work from anywhere environment? So this is something that we've given other presentations on before. So if you want more details than I'm about to give you right now, I highly recommend you check out our video library, which I'll go ahead and show you right now for those of you that are not familiar. From our university, if you go to education and then video library, you can find every webinar we've ever done at your fingertips, just waiting for you to watch. And I know we have a remote workforce webinar on here somewhere. You can sort by product and topic to find just what you're looking for. But because I don't want to leave you with nothing, I do want to call out a couple of my favorite items to mention in regards to this. So one of the biggest downsides of working remotely from a manager's perspective is you lose just a ton of insight into what your team is doing. You can't just look over, you can't just shout out and ask. You may feel like you're flying blind. But if your team is using Manage effectively, which is something we've been preaching long before the current circumstances hit, you'll find you actually have a lot more at your disposal than you may have realized. So hopping back into Manage, one thing I recommend is checking out some of the built-in dashboards we have available, because they're going to offer a lot of insight into what's going on with your team right now. So you can hop in here and go to All Reports. And I just want to look up all the dashboards because those are the ones that I think are most relevant given the current conversation. The trick is you have to know how to spell correctly. If you don't, you won't find anything. All right. The couple I like to call out specifically from the service side, I like the dashboard service in progress and the dashboard service by member for seeing exactly what a member is doing right now. So because this database I'm in has betrayed me once already by not having the data I'm looking for, I'm actually going to cheat a little bit and pull up one of our docs for this report because I know this doc has a very good screenshot that shows what I want you guys to see. So this dashboard service in current, or dashboard service current, is going to show you what your service board looks like right now and call out tickets that need your attention. Those tickets that need your attention are going to be right down here in this SLA goals section. These are your SLA goals based on today. Tickets that are threatening to miss and ones that have already missed. And then you can also see what other tickets your team is currently working on. If I jump back, the other one that I think is useful, and this is for tracking kind of, is your team keeping up with where they should be, is the dashboard service in progress. Here we're going to see a breakdown of all the tickets that are currently ongoing for your team. What are you working on right now? And we're going to call it potential issues. These are those scheduled items past due. Those are tickets that were scheduled but we haven't worked on yet, and tickets that we've entered more than 2 hours on. If I move down here, I can actually see in real time which of my team members are actually keeping up to date with their tickets. I can see how much are currently in progress, how many that have no scheduled entry whatsoever, how many are overscheduled, and what I really like, how much time have they entered for today. So we got Matthew Gold here, he's entered 4 hours. That's great if it's say 1 o'clock, 4 hours is about where he should be. But if it's 5 p.m. and he only has 4 hours, that's a problem. That tells me he's not entering all time on the time, all time, all the time on time. And that's something that we need to keep on top of. This will give me real-time insight into how my team is entering their time throughout the day. And there's a ton more like this in that webinar I mentioned if this is a topic that you are dying to know more about. All right, that's it as I'm seeing for the questions on using managed product. So with that, I'm gonna hop over to Cell for a bit. But if you have more questions, please, please, please ask them. That's why I'm here. I have a lot more fun if you guys ask questions. Plus side, you get your questions answered, and that's what we all want. All right, hopping over to ConnectWise Cell now. First question, how do I get signatures on 2 pages in ConnectWise Cell with Order Porter? Now, I'm not sure whether you're asking whether you're trying to capture 2 different signatures or take one signature and add it to 2 different places. I will admit that customizing Order Porter and customizing quote forms is the topic I know the least about with Cell, so I'm not going to be giving you a definitive answer, but I can point you in the right direction. So if you're looking to change the Order Porter page and customize what the customer sees on there, that is going to be controlled under Settings, Document Branding, Order Porter Templates. You can find the template you want to change. Say I wanted to change Cell Accordion. Then you'll want to look at this entry point right here. Entry point is going to be that landing page they see for Order Porter. You can go Edit to make a change. And over here on the left, you can see all the different fields we can paste in. And if you're decent with HTML, which I am not, you'll be able to kind of start recognizing how these are being parsed in and displayed on the Order Porter page. Now, as far as capturing those signatures on the quote form, that printed PDF, instead of working here, you're going to want to look at editing the quote forms themselves, which I know the least about probably within Cell. It's my weakest topic, I'll admit. That's under quote preparation, manage additional content. You'll need to use the form designer. And if this is something you're not comfortable with doing yourself, don't worry, you can contact our Cell form design team and they'll be able to work with you as a billable service to have your Order Porter templates and quote forms looking exactly how you want. To access the form designer, you'll come all the way down here to this desktop admin, and that's how you'll pull it up. Any plan to integrate DocuSign with ConnectWise Cell to support signatures on attached PDFs? Not that I know of. If that is an integration you're looking to see added, I do recommend reaching out on our enhancement forums. For those of you that are not familiar, they can be found at connectwise.com/enhancements. Or for those that hate typing, like me, because I can't, you can head over to our enhancement forums from here. This is where you can vote on existing enhancements and add new ones. Our product team uses these to see how many partners would really benefit from any given feature to help determine what new features to add in to all of our ConnectWise products. Someone had a question on bundling products in Cell, like for cybersecurity packages. This is one that I can definitely talk to. I actually have a good example quote I can use. Let's see if I have my quote template in here still. I do not. Let's see if I can find an old quote I built with my template. There we go, risk mitigation services. So oftentimes you'll want to sell products together as a bundle, display them together for the customer, and make sure all the information then flows from Sell over to Manage in a nice, clean, and consistent way. So for these security services, how you bundle them is actually going to come down to one distinction. Is this going to be a one-time thing? Is this a security project you're doing for your customer? Or is this going to be a set of recurring services that you're billing them on a recurring schedule? Because depending on whether it's going to be the one-time or recurring, we're going to handle it 2 slightly different ways. You're going to build this out on our prepare content screen. Here I built up my quote. I have a couple informational tabs just giving the customer information. Then I have my content, the real juicy part of my quote. Here on this risk mitigation plan, I built out my project plan on exactly how we're going to implement these new security solutions to the customer. And you'll see I've actually built out a couple different bundles. And in this case, I've based it around which quarter I plan to implement these new solutions. Quarter 1, I have all of these items right here. Others that I may have talked about with the customer, we need done, but we don't need done right away. We've bundled into quarter 2. As far as how are these created, these are product bundles that I've created within Manage as bundle class products and then sourced into Cell. Then they'll be passed over to Manage as bundles as well. And one great thing about these bundle products is when it comes time to actually implement the services I sold here, these bundles and line items will actually be created as a project as phases and tickets. So I don't need to duplicate my effort. I don't need to reinvent the wheel, redo data entry. We're going to reuse that same information. That goes back to that slide I showed you earlier when we have the ConnectWise Managed lifecycle from end to end. We really do use all that effort we put into the quote initially on to make sure we have a beautiful, professional, informational quote. Well, that's not just for the customer's benefit, it's for our benefit as well. And we push that information along all the way through. For the recurring services, on this quote, I don't have them bundled together, but I have a list of recurring services listed out here. You can simply group them on a tab like I have right now, but we do have a newer feature coming out later this year called invoice grouping. Invoice grouping allows you to create groups of products that you can add to your quote, similar to bundles, except now they'll work for recurring services as well. The existing product bundles in Manage do not work with agreements. So bundling agreement products and adding them to your quote breaks down the process later on. However, this new invoice grouping feature will allow you to group these recurring services, add them as a group, and then invoice them as a group on your agreement later on, smoothly from end to end. Someone wants to know if I can walk through the quote demand process. I'm glad you asked about that because quote demand is what I think one of the most exciting features for the integration between Cell and Manage. They're both really useful products on their own. Manage integrates with several different quoting platforms. Cell integrates with several different CRMs. But this is one of those unique features that I think really makes the integration between the two shine. And quote demand, for those of you that are not familiar, functions in a way that's very similar to those workflow rules I talked about earlier. Next, one difference is they're going to be set up within Cell, and the only action that they're going to have is to create a quote. So to actually set them up, I'm going to hop into sales coaching here and go to quote demand. Here, I have a whole bunch of demands configured in here. A common one I see is agreement renewal. Earlier, I talked about how we created an activity to let someone know an agreement needed to be renewed. Well, if I'm renewing the agreement, I'm probably going to want to create a new quote for that too. So let's go ahead and just do that. Skip a step rather than having someone manually create a quote, which is more complicated than it sounds because they'll have to create the new quote in Cell, select the right template, but the template doesn't have the right products. You have to go back, reference the agreement, see which products they have, then make sure you source those right products on your new quote. And if there's a lot of products, it might take a while. There's a lot of steps there. This agreement demand is going to save all of that because not only do we create a brand new quote with the right template, give it a second. Let's see if we can pull up another one. Not only is it going to create a new quote with the right template, but it is also going to go ahead and import all of those products over as well. So any products, all active products I had on the agreement additions will go ahead and add automatically. And not only are we adding the products, we're adding them at the right quantity, at the current price. All that information, up-to-date information on our agreement is what we'll use to requote this going forward. Now, if I want to charge a price increase at the time of renewal, I can apply that price adjustment as I adjust the quote before I send it out. But all that baseline information of where we're at right now will go ahead and add to that new quote automatically for me based on criteria I set. If you're looking to get analytics out of Cell, what is the easiest way to get them? If you're integrated with Manage, probably the easiest way to get them is to use the reporting within Manage because every quote in Cell should have a corresponding opportunity. If you don't, you're not going to be finding the information you want to find anyway. You probably have some messy processes. You're going to have some junk data, quotes that are open that really shouldn't be anymore, quotes that exist that aren't really tied to anything. But if you are creating an opportunity for every single quote, those opportunities are going to give you a ton of information within Manage. Now, your question was easiest, and that is the easiest way, but it is not the only way. We do also have Cell Intel, which is going to be a Cell integration with Microsoft Power BI. There is some setup involved in that. We have how-to videos that walk you through what that is, but that'll allow you to do reporting directly from within Cell, and there's a lot of built-out dashboards within Power BI, Cell Intel, for you to take advantage of. So that is another option, a little more effort to set up, but there's a bigger payoff. Does Cell Basic have the capability to integrate into direct providers for software? That I am not sure of. I know Cell Basic is limited on the features that are available. For example, the quote demand isn't there, but I know the templating and whatnot is all there out of the box. As far as integrations go, you're gonna have to contact that integrator themselves and see with them what they do and don't integrate with. When are we able to use signatures that are automated when emailing clients through tickets and manage? Okay, I think I know what you're asking. If I'm off, please let me know, and I can hopefully course correct and get back on track. I think what you're asking is when can we add our personal signatures into ticket emails automatically? And if so, the answer is right now. You could be doing it as we speak. But there is some setup involved, and I'll admit it's on the more complicated side, but what you're asking for is very doable. To do this, first you'll have to set up what your signature is, and you'll probably want to do this for everyone in your team so our automation works going forward. And while that pulls up, I'm going to go ahead and hop in over to my setup tables, which is the second piece we will need. And I may have gotten a little carried away with these tabs, so I'm going to dial it back a little bit. All right. So from our My Account screen, if I scroll down here, you'll see our signature. You can build out whatever you want your signature to be, set that up in here. That's step one. Once your team's signatures are in place, now we need to make sure that signature is being added in to closed loop emails. For this, we're going to go to the service board setup table. And let's go ahead and pretend we were doing this on our help desk. Now, there's a couple things we'll need to do. First, out of the box, ConnectWise Manage is going to be using a hard-coded email template for your closed loop emails. There's no way to change that template, but we can override it, which is what we'll want to do. And we do that here by selecting a new template to use. Now, as you can see, I don't have a new template to use for closed loop, so I'll need to create one. So for that, I'm gonna hop over to my email format setup table. And if this is something that you guys are interested in, but I've lost you already, don't worry. We have a how-to video on the university. It's only a couple minutes long. It'll walk you through step by step. So if this is something you want to go ahead and set up later, check that out, watch it. Just search for email signature on the university video library and you should find it. And we want the email formats. Let's go ahead and create a brand new one. Here, I'm going to create a new template to use for all of my closed loop email. I want to give it a subject line. I want to make sure I have the ticket number, and then I want to make sure we have that in the subject line. That way, any replies get added back into the ticket. Customize the rest however you want. We don't want to use the sender's email address. We want to make sure that it's coming from the email connector. And then here in our actual body, we can customize that however we want. The only important piece is member signature. Now, with this member signature, whenever my team members enter their time entries on tickets, we'll go ahead and pull this member signature from their My Account screen automatically. David, I apologize, but I am going to call you out here a little bit. You're saying, can we do this without closed loop? Seems very unnecessary to change ticket status or time entry just to email a client a question. If you're using closed loop correctly, you're not adding any extra work for yourself. You're just typing up an email, clicking save. As a bonus, it's recording the time you spent on that ticket. You don't have to make any other changes. So if adding a time entry is somehow making this process more complicated for you, I'd say there's probably a disconnect somewhere, because really, the free time entry is a benefit of sending an email, in my opinion. And I'll show you what I'm talking about, because this is making me very concerned, if I'm being honest. Let me pull up a service board here, see if I can find a ticket to use as an example. All right. Let's say I was working with this need new Windows installation ticket. So as a technician, I'm gonna pull open this ticket and I'm gonna start working. I'm gonna say, okay, this all looks good. Let's see what the issue is here. blah, 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 read their information, and I'm gonna start working. And it may take a minute, may take 5 minutes, may take 10, however long it takes. Eventually, I'm gonna finish working the issue, and I want to send an email to the customer letting them know that I have finished, and I may want to give them some information about what I did during that time. When I'm happy with this, I can go ahead, click create a new time entry. I don't use Firefox very often, but I wanted something clean for this webinar. So I'll pull up my time entry screen. And here, my start time populated for me whenever I opened this ticket, which was just now because I was going through a quick example. But if I started working 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 36 minutes ago, that start time defaulted for me to whenever I opened up this ticket screen. So now I can go say, I might do something that simple. If I was a better tech, I'd probably leave them a little bit more information, talk about what the issue was, what I did to fix it, and what they should expect now. Once I'm happy with all of that, I can just go ahead and click save and close. Normally, I'd like this selected by default for me. And when I hit save and close, I can update the status if I want. David, if you don't want to, you don't have to. All I had to do here was type in my information. But when I click save and close, the end time is calculated for me. So all I did was type up the email. I didn't do any extra effort here. But now, in addition to the email being sent, my notes are logged on the ticket, so any resources can come back later and see what I did. And on top of that, I now have a time entry for the exact amount of time I worked on that ticket. So if that still sounds a little too complicated for you, or is that doesn't match what you're doing, you're seeing a different issue, please let me know, because the ability to add a time entry should be making your life easier instead of harder in this scenario. Is there any ability or roadmap for Manage to be able to address having multiple quotes as options in Cell and being able to choose which to forecast? No. And that's because we have a better solution available right now. You probably don't want to create separate quotes. I can tell you from a end user standpoint, from your customer standpoint, that's more complicated to see for flipping around between multiple different pieces of information that may or may not be tied back together. What we have instead is the ability to create different options on a single quote. These options can be tab-based or line item based, and there is a ton of flexibility of how you use those two things together to make your quote convey exactly what you're looking for. This can be choosing from a group of options, choosing between two options, selecting from a list what you want, entering quantities of how much of each individual item you want. There's a ton of flexibility with making it match what you want, and has the added bonus of being a single quote, which fixes your forecasting problem. Because with these options, you can specify which ones are and are not selected. Since you know if you're selling, say, a contract to the customer, and there's 3 different contracts to choose from, they're only ever going to buy one. So you set those up as a group, and then one will only ever be selected. So your forecasting will show that only one of those can be one, instead of tripling your forecast, which makes you look good, but doesn't bring in any additional money. The person asking about options chimed back in. They said that does not work for them because their quotes are too large. Because they have hundreds of options available, a single quote becomes too messy. I'm sorry that's the case. I'd like to think that we could accomplish what you're looking for with a different set of tabs, breaking it out, using the different tabs to represent the different quotes, or maybe different parts of the quote, but it sounds like you've already been down that road, so you know what's working for you. Ah, David chimed back in against the issue he's having. He's talking about getting the signature ad using this envelope right here. I would honestly suggest just pretend that envelope isn't there. There's no reason to use that envelope over the time entry screen. Yes, you can type up an email from here, but you don't get all the extra information, and it takes just as long as typing up the same information in the time entry screen. And the truth is, the time you spent typing up that email, that's still time. That's still time that you spent doing something. And if you're sending the email through this little icon, that time is now vanished. If you send the email through the time entry screen, we've now captured that time in the ticket itself. I do a lot of our company's procurement. Do you have any tips or tricks for me? I know a lot of new features have been added since I did my original training, and I try to keep up with them, but it isn't always easy because it gets busy. Yes, it does. And I think just about every release we've had over the last 6 to 12 months has had something procurement related in it. Now, I'll admit, not all of them have been huge, but many of them have just been really simple quality of life things to make your life easier. I can't think of a lot right now, but I'll give you kind of an example of what I'm talking about. Some of the smaller ones that have been seen consistently added are taking simple things like information that previously was hidden or squirreled away in one spot and making it now available in the list views. So you'll see list views like here on the purchasing screen. This screen has always had quite a few columns available, but other product screens, which could show the same information, may have been missing a couple critical pieces. Like it may have been harder to see on hand or on order looking at this same set of data from a different screen. We've created more consistency across the board and made commonly requested columns just available everywhere to make it easier to find what you're looking for. That's kind of sums up a lot of the small ones I've seen. As far as bigger ones, one of the biggest ones I can remember in recent memory is the serial number search. Uh, Rather than having to look up individual products and then find what serial numbers are available, you can do serial number searches directly from here. So you can go ahead, you know the serial number, punch it in, get the direct product you're looking for. Again, we just want to make it easier to find what you're looking for within procurement, just because from talking to partners, that's where a lot of the hangups ended up being. You knew the information was in there, it just wasn't easy to find. In Manage, how do we create a workflow to tickle our staff to follow up with a customer when status has been waiting on customer exceeds 1 week? That is going to be with the workflow rules. So like I mentioned with my workflow rule example from before, because you're talking about specific statuses and statuses are unique to boards, you'll want to make sure that the workflow rule you're using is set to a board, because if it's not set to a board, we don't know what statuses to pick from. So here we have one. Service customer has not responded for say 5-7 days. This sounds like what we're looking for. All right. So here I have, we're looking for a ticket is in client waiting client response and last updated more than blank days ago. So in this case, these are set to run just once. Let's go ahead and expand one out. Looks like those actions are bad. Let's see if I can find a different one. I'll just create a brand new one here. Service tickets, help desk, and we're looking for specific status. So then we're looking for waiting client response. Then we'll add an operator and caring about the status again. The status hasn't been changed in, let's say, 45 hours would be a work week. That's good. Now, what do we want to do when we find these tickets? We want to go ahead, you said you wanted to tickle an internal team member. You have a couple options. You can either send them an email or you can send them a push notification. Either one will work, going ahead and notifying them. If you're waiting on client status, I would say it's probably useful to maybe notify the client as well, just as a friendly reminder, letting them know, hey, we are waiting to hear back from you on whatever this issue is. David chimed back in. So he mentioned something that I did gloss over talking about earlier, which is those short time entries we're ending for just sending an email. If you have rounding in place, which I'll say most of our partners do, if you're doing a lot of those quick emails and it does only take a minute, that rounding can add up. And if you are billing customers for that, well, then you may want to reevaluate what you are and are not billing for from that rounding perspective. Or if you consider something like a quick email not something you want to round or not something you want to bill for, it may be worthwhile creating a different work type. Those work types I mentioned earlier when we were going over utilization in the previous session, those represent the different ways you spend your team spends their time. And you'll want to create new work types whenever you have a billing distinction you want to make. So in this instance, if we're just sending an email, we either don't want to round or we don't want to bill for that time. I'd say it's probably still billable because we're spending time helping the client, but I understand the case for not rounding up in that scenario. If that's the case, Rex Frank chimed in. He actually is very similar to what I had. He has a communication work type in his instance of manage. Let me see if I can find it. Here's my setup tables. Don't need to save that. Hop back to work type. I don't think I have one in here right now. I don't. So let's say we're going to create a new work type to kind of fill this gap we're seeing in our process right now. We'll use Rex naming convention, which is communications. And let's say, yes, we want to bill for this, but we don't want to round at all. In this case, I'm going to set my round bill hours to 0, which tells it we're not going to round anything. But I need to enter something here because I want to override the default rounding in my system. Because I may be, by default, rounding everything up to the nearest 15 minutes, but in this instance, I do not want to round at all. In Rex Frank's example he gave earlier, this is something he doesn't usually charge for, but he does want to make the customer aware that his team is spending time for that. In that case, that's something we can do as well. We can simply set it as no charge. In this case, we can still use that rounding since oftentimes, even though I may have only spent a minute or two doing this, because this is something I had to go do and then go back and do something else, it probably ate up more of my time than the 2 minutes I spent doing that. So rounding still shows how much time is being spent, but because it's no charge, this is something we can show to the customer, but not bill for them and not charge their agreement. And as far as how you would use this and when entering your time, I mentioned earlier when we were typing up our notes that we didn't have to make any changes. There is now one change your team will want to make, and that is adjusting the work type on the time entry from whatever your default is, maybe regular or remote, and flipping that over to the communication. Something your team will be a change in their process, so they might have to get used to, but I think it will help them in the long run, being able to go quickly say, okay, I'm just sending a quick email, use that email or communication type, and now my billing will reflect what's actually happening. And that does it for my time. I would like to thank you all so much